Now that we have a detailed discussion on how oxygen is carried in the blood, you got to know about the oxygen content, oxygen binding capacity, oxygen delivery, hemoglobin dissociation curve, and the factors causing its right or left shift. So, here comes the other respiratory gas that we exhale with our every breath. Carbon dioxide. This oxidized carbon represents important side product of both glycolysis and the citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle that ultimately needs to be removed using transport to the lungs and subsequent expiration out into the surrounding environment. Now, transport of carbon dioxide by the blood is not nearly as problematical as transport of oxygen is. Well, this is because even in the most abnormal conditions, carbon dioxide can usually be transported in far greater quantities than can oxygen. However, the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood has a lot to do with the acid-base balance of the body fluids. You can learn in detail about it in our videos on acid-base balance and acidosis and alkalosis. Well, carbon dioxide is produced in the tissues and is carried to the lungs in the venous blood. Under normal resting conditions, an average of 4 milliliters of carbon dioxide are transported from the tissues to the lungs in each 100 milliliters of blood. Now, how you think blood transports the carbon dioxide? Well, it does so in 4 different ways. Firstly, it transports carbon dioxide in the freely dissolved form, and this form contributes to transport about 7% of carbon dioxide. Secondly, it transports carbon dioxide as carbonic acid, but carbonic acid is highly unstable, so its contribution in transportation is almost negligible. Thirdly, carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonates. Do you remember the source of these bicarbonates? We have just discussed it in transport of oxygen. Yes. Bicarbonates are formed when carbon dioxide dissolves in plasma. It reacts with the water in the plasma to form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid then dissociates into bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. Well, this is the most important form, transporting about 63% of carbon dioxide. Now, lastly, about 30% of carbon dioxide is transported as carbamino compounds, which is carbon dioxide bound to the hemoglobin, forming carbaminohemoglobin. Now, a question pops up here in my mind. How can hemoglobin transport both oxygen and carbon dioxide at a time? Well, hemoglobin can transport both oxygen and carbon dioxide at the same time. This is because they bind to different sites on the hemoglobin molecule. Whereas carbon monoxide, if you remember, competes with oxygen for the same binding site, hence decreasing the binding of oxygen and causing severe poisoning. Now, let's have a closer look at all of these forms one by one. Starting off with the dissolved form. Carbon dioxide diffuses into blood and dissolves in the fluid of plasma, forming a simple solution. The amount of dissolved carbon dioxide in the plasma is determined by its partial pressure. The higher the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the tissues, the more of it that will go into solution. Only about 3 milliliters of carbon dioxide per 100 milliliters of plasma is transported as dissolved state, which is in fact about 7% of total carbon dioxide in the blood. Now, as carbonic acid, or H2CO3. Well, a part of dissolved carbon dioxide in plasma here undergoes hydration. That means it combines with the water, and it results in the formation of carbonic acid. But this carbonic acid is highly unstable and readily dissociates into bicarbonate and hydrogen ion. So, transport of carbon dioxide in this form is almost negligible, and for that reason, you may not find it as a form of transport in most literature. Now, this bicarbonate produced as a result of dissociation of carbonic acid is the major form in which carbon dioxide is transported, because it carries out 63% of its transport. From plasma, carbon dioxide can enter the red blood cells. In the red blood cells, now again, carbon dioxide combines with water to form carbonic acid. And reaction inside red blood cells is very rapid, and carbonic acid formation here in the red blood cells is at least 200 to 300 times more than it is in the plasma. Can you tell the reason? Any guess? I told you. The reason is the presence of carbonic anhydrase, an enzyme present only inside the red blood cells and not in plasma, and because enzymes are meant to accelerate the reaction, so it do so. And almost all carbonic acid formed in red blood corpuscles dissociates into bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. Concentration of bicarbonate ions in the cell increases more and more, and due to high concentration, bicarbonate ions diffuse through the cell membrane into plasma. Let's zoom in here. Now, when the negatively charged bicarbonate ions move out of red blood cell into the plasma, it must do that in exchange of something, right? Well, it is necessary in order to maintain the electrolyte equilibrium or the ionic balance. So, this job is done by the negatively charged chloride ions, because plasma has plenty of sodium chloride that dissociates into sodium and chloride ions. So, these chloride ions move into the red blood cell. This exchange of a chloride ion for a bicarbonate ion across red blood cell membrane is known as chloride shift or Hamburger phenomenon, named after its discovery by the Hartog Jacob Hamburger in 1892. Well, this diffusion across the membrane of red blood cells is made possible by the presence of a special bicarbonate chloride carrier protein present in the red blood cell membrane that shuttles these two ions in opposite directions at rapid velocities. Bicarbonate ions combine with sodium ions in the plasma and form sodium bicarbonate. In this way, it is transported in the blood. While most of the hydrogen ions dissociated from carbonic acid then combine with hemoglobin in the red blood cells, because the hemoglobin protein is a powerful acid-base buffer, maintaining the pH of blood. Now, can you imagine what happens if the reverse occurs? Yes, it really happens in our lungs, known as reverse chloride shift, where the chloride ions are moved back into plasma from red blood cell shift. Let me explain it to you. When blood reaches the alveoli, sodium bicarbonate in plasma dissociates, again forming sodium and bicarbonate ions. Now, these bicarbonate ions move into the red blood cells and pour chloride ions, again compensating it, by leaving the red blood cell and entering into the plasma. Here, it combines with sodium and forms sodium chloride again. Now, the bicarbonate ion inside the red blood cell combines with hydrogen ion and form carbonic acid, which dissociates into water and carbon dioxide. Now, the carbon dioxide produced as a result is then expelled out. So, that was how carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonates. Now, lastly, about 30% carbon dioxide is transported as carbamino compounds. What does that mean? Well, carbon dioxide is transported in blood in combination with hemoglobin and plasma proteins. This combo of carbon dioxide with hemoglobin forms carbamino hemoglobin or carb hemoglobin, and carbon dioxide combines with plasma proteins to form carbamino proteins. Carbamino hemoglobin and carbamino proteins are together called carbamino compounds. Now, the binding of carbon dioxide with both proteins or hemoglobin is through a loose bond, so that carbon dioxide is easily released into alveoli, where the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is low. Thus, the combination of carbon dioxide with proteins and hemoglobin is a reversible one. Amount of carbon dioxide transported in combination with plasma proteins is very less, as compared to the amount transported in combination with hemoglobin. What can be the possible reason for this? Well, it is because the quantity of proteins in plasma is only half of the quantity of hemoglobin. So, lesser proteins, lesser is the amount of carbon dioxide transported by them. So, that was all about the four forms in which carbon dioxide is transported: dissolved form, as carbonic acid, as bicarbonate, and as carbamino compounds. Now, next on our tour is carbon dioxide dissociation curve. We saw that carbon dioxide is transported in blood as physical solution, in combination with water, plasma proteins, and hemoglobin. Now, the amount of carbon dioxide combining with blood depends upon the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, hence forming a curve known as carbon dioxide dissociation curve. Carbon dioxide dissociation curve is the curve that demonstrates the relationship between the partial pressure of carbon dioxide and the quantity of carbon dioxide that combines with blood. Or, in other words, it depicts the dependence of total blood carbon dioxide in all its forms on partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Here, partial pressure of carbon dioxide is plotted on x-axis, while the carbon dioxide content, or the carbon dioxide concentration in blood in milliliters percent, is plotted on y-axis, rather than just its hemoglobin saturation like oxygen. Can you guess the reason? Yes, it's obviously because I told you that almost all the oxygen is present bound to the hemoglobin. So, in oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, we just use the bound form, while here we are considering total carbon dioxide present in all its forms. Now, this is how a normal carbon dioxide dissociation curve looks like. You can see from here that the carbon dioxide content in the blood is 48 milliliters percent, when the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 40 millimeters of mercury, and it is 52 milliliters percent when the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 48 millimeters of mercury. Whereas carbon dioxide content becomes 70 milliliters percent when the partial pressure is about 100 millimeters of mercury. Now, earlier in this video, we noted that an increase in carbon dioxide in the blood causes oxygen to be displaced from the hemoglobin. In other words, causing the unloading of oxygen. That was what we called the Bose effect, which is quite an important factor in increasing oxygen transport. Now, on the flip side, binding of oxygen with hemoglobin tends to displace carbon dioxide from the blood, or carbon dioxide unloading. This effect is known as Haldane effect, and it's quantitatively far more important in promoting carbon dioxide transport than the Bohr effect in promoting oxygen transport. You can define it as the effect by which combination of oxygen with hemoglobin displaces carbon dioxide from hemoglobin. Well, it's named after John Scott Haldane, who introduced it first in 1860. Now, does the carbon dioxide dissociation curve shift like the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve? Yes, it does so in excess of oxygen. Well, the oxygen content in blood causes shift of the carbon dioxide dissociation curve to right. Anyways, combination of oxygen with hemoglobin in the lungs causes the hemoglobin to become a stronger acid. This displaces carbon dioxide from the blood and into the alveoli. Now, this happens in two ways. One of them is that, first, the more highly acidic hemoglobin has less tendency to combine with carbon dioxide to form carbaminohemoglobin, thus displacing much of the carbon dioxide that is present in the carbaminophore from the blood. But what about the other one? Well, that's what you know already. Because of the increased acidity of the hemoglobin, which causes it to release an excess of hydrogen ion. These hydrogen ions bind with bicarbonate ions to form carbonic acid. This carbonic acid, in turn, dissociates into water and carbon dioxide. And this carbon dioxide is released from blood into alveoli, finally into the air. So, Haldane effect is essential for the release of carbon dioxide from blood into the alveoli of lungs, and also the uptake of oxygen by the blood. Or, in other words, unloading of carbon dioxide and loading of oxygen. So, that was about the transport of the two respiratory gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. I hope now you are pretty much clear about these. Let's now have a look at the terms hyperventilation and hyperventilation in the next section. And then we will have a quick recap of what you have learned here. So, do not go anywhere and stick to the video till the end.
Explore our extensive library of over 1,800 video lectures to learn about a wide range of topics. Only on sqadia.com.